Well, today's topic is on elevating your employee experience with the power of social good. And so we're really excited to get this kick-started. And if there was something you were hoping we would cover today on this, feel free to drop in the chat and we'll try our best to weave it into the conversations today. And just to kick it off, I want to wish everybody a happy National Volunteer Month. Apparently, April is National Volunteer Month and Canada's National Volunteer Week. So we're really excited to be celebrating this amazing theme with WeHero today. I personally believe that volunteering and charitable giving is just something that's super important to lots of different people. And so it's a great way to get people engaged at work. And so it was so great to bring Ben from WeHero here today, since you're all about that corporate volunteering and employee engagement. And I just wanted to share this quick little blurb I found from Volunteer Canada. Their theme this week, or for this month's week, is Volunteering Weaves Us Together. I thought that was super beautiful. I really like their description of this theme. And personally, I do find that sharing something like a volunteering experience with people and doing something meaningful together just really helps to solidify those bonds and build such great memories. Ben, was there something you want to add to this theme?
No, I was just more so saying April for Volunteer Month is like our Super Bowl. It's like it's like Earth Month, Volunteer Week. So awesome theme, and glad everybody could join.
So, well, as we brought up earlier today, the session is brought to you by Bucketlist, which is the #1 employee rewards and recognition platform, and in partnership with WeHero, the #1 corporate volunteer solution. And just a really quick intro about us, your speakers today. Ben Sampson is the co-founder and CEO of WeHero, and he works really closely with hundreds of companies to help them reach their social impact goals. Ben speaks really actively about corporate social responsibility, volunteerism, sustainability, and how companies united with activism can drive really powerful change. Ben's past experience includes leading product teams, building startups, and studying sustainable business strategy at Harvard. And in his free time, he's an avid outdoor enthusiast who really enjoys skiing, surfing, and mountain biking. And Ben, we ask all of our guest speakers this: what's an item on your personal bucket list?
Oh man, I think it's about to happen. Beck and I were just talking about going to Japan in September, and that's been on our list for a long time. And so it's finally happening in September. So that's on the bucket list, and soon going to check that off.
Amazing. That's super awesome. And for myself, hello, I'm Rebecca. I'm the content and community manager here at Bucketlist Rewards. I'm really passionate about all things community, as well as employee happiness and well-being. And outside of work, similar to Ben, I enjoy the outdoor things like paddleboarding, hiking, but also reading and enjoying the food scene in Vancouver. And one item on my bucket list, which I'm proud to say I'm ticking off this month, is learning how to draw. I'm halfway through this botanicals in ink and watercolor class that I found, and it's been great. Awesome. So just a couple of really quick housekeeping items. I'm sure many of you have discovered the chat box feature we have. Just wanted to note too that I know often the default is that on the blue button is just to host and panelists, so only Ben and I can see it. And so if it's something that you want the whole group to see, just make sure to pop that down to everyone. The second thing is we have Q&A at the end, so feel free to submit your questions in the box. We'll also be doing a couple of poll questions. Would love to see your thoughts around the questions we're asking today. It's all going to be aggregated, so no, we can't see what people are responding as. The number 4 thing is we're also giving out professional development credits, so stay tuned for that. And lastly, I know this is always a really big question. Yes, we're recording the session and we'll be sending it out afterwards via email. Awesome. So let's start with a really fun icebreaker question just to get us all in the mood for the theme today. What's a fun team volunteering or corporate philanthropy event that you've attended or seen? And as people are thinking about what to share in the chat, Ben, I'm sure you have tons of great examples. You want to kick off this discussion?
Sure, I can just share one that I thought was really cool. It involved kayaking and identifying invasive algae. And so this was a volunteer event that took place at Lake Tahoe in California, Nevada. Had a species of invasive algae that was quickly taking over the lake. And so UC Davis built out a mobile application to help identify that algae. And what we did is we had volunteers actually go out in kayaks, paddle around the lake, and they would identify the invasive algae species with that app. And then that day, divers would go out and remove that algae based on where they like located the algae in the lake. So definitely a really fun, really cool experience that we helped run. So that'll be my icebreaker share out for this one.
Oh, I love that. I also love how with these events, there's often that educational component to it and lots of like hands-on things to do so that you're gaining more than just, doing the thing. You're learning a lot from it too.
Yeah, Terry's rappelling down a building for cancer. That's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah, kid, that's awesome.
Yeah. Wrapping presents for a local shelter.
Yeah.
That's a really nice one. And I love how accessible that is to a lot of different people too. Like everyone can just sit around in the circle, wrap the gifts together and enjoy that moment. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for sharing. I'm sure we'll have a lot more discussions around this as the session goes on today. Oh, and Clara sent one as well, Ben, about a company offsite in Vietnam where they were helping out with projects at an orphanage.
Oh, that's cool.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
Awesome. Well, feel free to keep popping that in the chat. I'm sure everyone loves to read these interesting stories and ideas. So we'll just continue with that. Agenda for today, we'll kick off with some industry trends around charitable giving and volunteering in the workplace. We'll give a couple of examples around what makes corporate giving or volunteering so meaningful and powerful. And lastly, we'd always love to leave you with some tangible tools and strategies. And for this particular webinar, because the topic's around corporate philanthropy, we'd love to share some strategies around how to use that as a tool to improve your employee experience. And of course, as I mentioned prior, we'll be doing some Q&A at the end, so feel free to pop in your questions at any time. All right, to get this conversation started, we're going to kick off with a poll. Let me just launch it. Is that showing up, Ben? Or
yeah, I can see it on our end.
Perfect. Yeah, we just thought this would be a fun question. How important is volunteering or charitable giving to your employees? We just thought a question like this could help us really provide some context for the rest of this conversation today.
I'm not allowed to vote, but I would have had a very biased answer.
Totally. But Ben, as these numbers are coming in, what do you think about what we're seeing here?
Can I see the results as they come in?
Oh, maybe you cannot. I will leave it open for 3 more seconds and I'll share the poll so you can see it. So, share results.
Awesome. I'm actually more excited to talk about, amazing that there's a companies that it's very important, but it's really fun to talk about strategies for the companies that a few people volunteer into charitable giving in their personal lives. It's like, how do you take that and increase it and enhance it? And so excited, we'll be talking a lot about that today.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you everyone for voting. All right, stop share and next slide. Cool. So, Ben, I know we wanted to open up this discussion just talking a little bit about the power of volunteering and why it's super impactful for employee engagement. And so I thought a great way would just be to pick your brain for the next this next slide or so, and just to hear more about what you've seen in your experience. And maybe a natural first question could be, what is WeHero's origin story, and how did you figure out that there was a need for this type of platform?
Yeah, and I can also talk about just like how powerful this has been for companies, especially like kind of like the timing that we're in right now in the industry. But like how WeHero started was I was doing product consulting for different companies, and I ran into a woman that had the title of CSR at one of these projects and had no clue what that was. This was 6 years ago, and she went on to tell me how she was head of corporate social responsibility of the company. She was responsible for all the volunteering and philanthropic efforts of the company. And I just thought that was like fascinating that there was roles at this company that could do that. And so I would travel around to different companies in the US doing these projects. And I would always reach out to the CSR person, ask them to get coffee, see if I could pick their brain, because I was just like fascinated that there was a job for this. And I just thought that was amazing. And one thing that was really frustrating at the time was that volunteering at scale was really challenging. A lot of social impact teams within companies that are really small. A lot of the clients that we work with, it can be a 1 or 2 person CSR team for an 8,000 to 10,000 person company. Yesterday, I got off the phone with that exact case, 1 person CSR team, 10,000 employees. And so reaching those volunteers and engaging with them and having volunteer projects is really challenging with employee groups of that size. The other challenge too is, doing high impact volunteer initiatives. I think in a lot of cases, we find employees go through volunteer efforts and they come back going, that felt like busy work. It didn't feel like we made a huge amount of impact, and it can be really hard to re-engage those employees. But at the end of the day, the work of volunteering in companies, we've seen it to be incredibly powerful just for a variety of reasons. One of the big areas that we're talking with a lot of companies right now that are trying to attract talent is that we just met with a company, and 1 out of every 3 interviews, the interviewee is asking about the corporate volunteer and social impact initiatives at the company. And so employees that are looking for roles are actually asking about this, seeing how purpose-driven these businesses are. We also know that it's an incredible retention vehicle for companies. Employees want to engage and give back in this way. And what we're noticing is that team building is such a huge aspect in all of our companies. We want to be close with our peers. We want to, build those relationships. And volunteering has been an increasing method of doing so. There's, the opportunities to do happy hours or go to a sporting event, but we're seeing more and more groups go, we'd like to do something a little different with our time and with that budget. We'd like to give back. And we kind of view that as one of the most ultimate forms of team building in and of itself. And so there's a lot that can occur here. I think the last thing is volunteering's so great for companies that are going through some kind of recessionary period for themselves, in a struggling economy, having a more challenging time to get budgets. In 2008, when we had a huge recession, we saw volunteer numbers skyrocket, purely because monetary donations were not as available, but companies and individuals were still able to make an impact through the donation of their time and their energy. And so there's a lot of power in that, a lot of good that can be done. And so, and obviously, Becca, we'll talk a lot about that.
Totally. I love all the points you've brought up. I heard themes of attraction and retention in there, which is always a pain point for companies, especially times like now. I just have one follow-up question. I know you're sharing a couple of stories later down in this, but is there any particular stories that stand out to you that shows just how meaningful volunteering is for employees, or maybe something someone's said to you in the past?
Yeah, I mean, it's so meaningful for the employees that want to volunteer. But I think the stories that are really exciting is the employee that has never really volunteered before. We were volunteering with a group, and I was meeting with an employee that was very hesitant to volunteer, had never done volunteering, was interested in it, but wasn't sure they wanted to donate the time to actually do the cause. The reason they participated and actually volunteered was it was a cause area that had recently impacted their life, and it was cancer. And so, they had this nonprofit was the Ronald McDonald House Charities. For those of you that don't know, it's an incredible organization that's working to support families that are going through really difficult circumstances with kids that are in the hospital, and many times it's kids that are being challenged with cancer. And so they had a family member that had recently gone through cancer treatment, and they signed up to do this cause. And it was cool seeing just how moved they were just doing that activation event and learning about the cause. And I think the stories that we love is that this volunteer did this volunteer project, and now they're an ongoing supporter for the nonprofit organization. And that ability just to make that easy for them to volunteer, to try this on and learn about the cause, and for them to have a long-term relationship now with the nonprofit is something that's really special. I think there's a lot of power in that.
Oh, totally. A lot to be said around trying new things and realizing that it's something that's become so meaningful to you, and you can't imagine what life is without it. Awesome. Well, thank you for that little intro. And I know, Ben, you had a few stats that you wanted to share to really hammer this point home about how powerful volunteering is.
Yeah, a few trends that we're noticing. One, I talked about just, we look at a lot of data, historical data, when it comes to volunteering and employee engagement. And because there's a lot of fear in the economy right now, we look at that data as well. in 2008, 2009, we saw a massive boom in employee volunteer hours across the board. And now that more and more companies are using CSR platforms and software to track this, we're actually able to grab that data and have it be more accessible. And we're seeing the same thing right now, actually. We're seeing some charitable and monetary donations decrease slightly, and we're seeing a huge boom in volunteer hours and that kind of social impact being made. And so that's a big trend that we're noticing, and we're looking at seeing a lot of employees raise their hand going, hey, don't have a ton of money to donate. I'm a little hesitant to do that, but I will donate my time. I'm here for that, which is really exciting. We do know, and companies are seeing a very strong correlation to the amount of money that employees are donating based on how they're volunteering for these causes. So our data is showing that employees that are volunteering, they're 2.2 times more likely to donate money to the cause that they supported through that volunteer effort. But the big metric that's been crazy to us in our data is that when they are donating, they're donating on average 10 times as much money. And the biggest reason they're doing that is because they have so much trust in the organization that they get so excited about the organization when they go through an activation experience. And we're seeing companies find a lot of success in this when they have big giving goals. Working in volunteering as part of that relationship and part of that strategy. And we think of it again as like an activation experience. So getting employees activated, they're seeing large bumps in their donation dollars from employees, which is really exciting. And so I know, Becca, I'll let you jump in here with some other industry trends that you're noticing on your end, because I know you guys are spending a lot of time looking at this data as well.
Yeah, the one I thought was super interesting was this one here in the middle, where employees are 5 times more engaged in companies with employee volunteer programs. I think that's amazing. How have you been seeing this trend play out in your clients' organizations?
I mean, very important. I mean, we can even talk, like kind of mentioned, even at the early stages of hiring, we're noticing like employees are choosing jobs in companies based on those factors. In the tech sector, for example, there's been a massive amount of turnover. 95% of those layoffs, so those employees have been rehired. And we're meeting a lot of these employees and client companies that are coming in, and one of the reasons they decided to join a respective company was because of their social impact programs. And so it's a huge determining factor. And so they're even hiring, they're even more engaged during their first weeks at the company as well. So we're 100% seeing this.
Amazing. And I think that really ties into this last stat we have here, which is that 55% of employees choose socially conscious companies over profit-focused brands. So that just really all ties in together. So it's really awesome to see. Awesome. Anything to add before we hop into our next slide about why it's so powerful?
No, keep going. And if folks have questions along the way, please feel free to throw them in the chat. I know we have a Q&A at the end, but happy to answer as we go as well.
Yeah, we love making these sessions as interactive as possible. So awesome. Now let's kick this one off, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think we get a lot of questions around how do we make our volunteer programs really meaningful and more powerful? And I think that the big question we get is how do we get more employees engaged in the program? We meet with a lot of companies where they're having, 5-10% employee engagement. They're setting goals of, 20 to 30% employee engagement. We're working with companies that have 90 to 95% employee engagement, and huge numbers. And so we spend a lot of time looking and studying the companies that are above and beyond the averages for employee engagement when it comes to volunteer and social impact, and what are they doing, and how are they getting employees this engaged. And there's a few things that we notice that are making a massive difference. Authenticity and impact. We view corporate volunteering from a strategic level as 3 key stages: a level 1 volunteer, a level 2 volunteer, and a level 3 volunteer. That level 1 volunteer is the volunteer that's trying on volunteering for the very first time. They're seeing like, is this fun? Is this an easy experience? Can I make an impact? And is this something that I want to do again? Oftentimes it's new hires that have come into the business. Sometimes it's an employee that hasn't volunteered for 8 years because maybe they had a bad experience. But that level 1 volunteer is really important. And it's really important that they have a very authentic and high impact experience so that they keep coming back. We want them to be a level 2 employee volunteer. That level 2 volunteer is someone that's like, I did a corporate volunteer project with my company. I had a great experience. And for future volunteer opportunities that they offer, I will definitely attend, whether that's once a month, once a quarter, whatever it is. And the goal is that we convert some of those level 2 volunteers to be level 3 volunteers. Level 3 volunteers become ambassadors for the social impact work that the company is doing. They are such fans and such supporters that they're actively moving throughout the company in employee resource groups or in different team meetings, so on and so forth, advocating for the social impact programs and the volunteer programs that the company is offering. And then we see this flywheel effect where it just starts scaling and more employees are getting engaged. But that very first volunteer experience is critically important. And authenticity and impact make a huge difference. Employees are looking for authentic experiences, meaning they have like direct relationships and connections with the nonprofits if possible, and they can actually see and feel and understand the impact that they're making with their time. And this really translates to having memorable and shared experiences. I always encourage companies and people that are planning these volunteer experiences to try to make them really unique. We all know very traditional formats of volunteering. Maybe it's going to a food bank, maybe it's volunteering at an animal shelter. All these formats of volunteering are really powerful and really amazing, but how can we take that to another level and do something that's really memorable and really special? We talked about that kayaking volunteer experience that I explained on Lake Tahoe. That's an example of something like employees are going to talk about that for a very long time. They're going to share that with their peers. It's a great way to just get buy-in for engagement and excitement around the program. And the last thing I'll say is that employee buy-in and engagement is so important. And what I mean by this is like actually asking your employee base, what are the causes that they care about? Surveying your employees, understanding, is it sustainability? Is it food insecurity? Like, what are the things that your employees really care about? And then also volunteering during times of year that your employees already want to volunteer. April, perfect example. Like good chance that a bulk of your employees are actively thinking about Earth Day, Earth Week, Earth Month, Volunteer Month. There's buzz around it just outside of the buzz that you're trying to generate in your company around volunteering. And so, I always like to use the analogy of you want to guide the boulder downhill instead of push the boulder uphill. And what I mean by that is like volunteer during times of the year that you already know your people want to volunteer. It makes a huge difference in your registration and engagement numbers when those employees have that buy-in excitement already. Becca, I'll pass it over to you. And I know you have a few other things you can share here for us.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Ben. I loved everything you said. And I think there's also a theme in there about not necessarily leadership just from the top, but when you're seeing your peers all kind of buy into this and doing it, just keeps generating the hype. So more and more people can join in and the whole thing just scales. So that's awesome point to bring. The 2 points I want to bring for this particular topic around why corporate giving and volunteering could be so meaningful and powerful is this idea of how it's something that can support the whole person. In case you've never heard of this term before, the idea of supporting the whole person is recognizing the fact that we're all just more than the work that we're doing, more than our jobs. Sorry, excuse me. We all have roles, interests, hobbies, goals, and passions outside of work. And for a lot of people, like Ben has been describing, volunteering is something that's really important to people and makes them feel really fulfilled. So it can be really meaningful for an employer to take notice of our passions outside of work and start incorporating them in at the workplace. So not only is volunteering a super fun experience, it also shows employees that our leaders really care about helping them thrive. And we did do a whole white paper on this recently about supporting the whole person in order to improve the employee experience. So if that's something you're interested in, feel free to hit yes in the chat and I'll make sure to get you a copy of that playbook. And the last thing on this slide I want to go over is the idea of employer branding. Like Ben and I chatted about on the last slide, it's becoming something that's super important to people. And we do see a lot of corporate volunteering showcased on various companies' culture pages and their social media. And in the consumer world, there's definitely been a lot more expectations for companies to be giving back to the community. And it can, as Ben was saying, be a huge draw for talent. I've been seeing that in the research, especially in the younger generations like millennials and Gen Z. This is something that's super important to them when they're kind of selecting their next employer. And the last point I wanted to touch upon is just that employer branding is great, and it's even better when it's kind of done through your people sharing their awesome experiences with insert your company name here. And when employees are really proud of the companies they're working at and they find that what they're doing is meaningful, they're definitely going to want to share that with their friends, their family, their own social media. It's just the best advertising ever, and it's totally free. Perfect. So as we promised, we will be sharing a few examples on how we can use philanthropy as a tool to engage our teams. So the first strategy here, celebrate by giving back. Just want to share a quick story about one of our clients called Procogia. They recently celebrated their 10-year anniversary, and they decided to do that by giving back to the community with a 10 days of giving campaign. So to choose the charities to highlight every day, they had a roundtable discussion so that employees could give feedback and suggestions on what causes mattered the most to them. And then the leadership team took that information back and chose the final 10 charities to showcase during the campaign. So in this case, it's a really good example of how employees were engaged in the process of building out this campaign. Their feedback was asked for, and I think that this really helped with the success of this campaign. I think now is a good time for me to explain a little bit about how charitable giving actually would work on Bucketlist, just to give some context for these stories I'm sharing. So we're like a rewards and recognition platform. People can collect points from the recognitions they're getting. And once you have enough, you can redeem them for rewards in the marketplace. So of course, you can get gift cards, experiences. But another option is for people to donate the points that they're accumulating towards charities and various causes that's near and dear to their hearts. And so in Procogia's case, they ended up setting up this campaign in Bucketlist, and on the left here, you can see all the different charities that they've selected. And what I thought was really cool was that they did a number of things to try to make this as inclusive and accessible as possible so that people were able to engage and participate. So the first thing was that they took into account that their teams distributed. And so they made sure to have options available where all their major hubs were. So in Vancouver, Seattle, India, and Ireland, so that people located all over the world could participate in this campaign when their home charity popped up. And they also offered a range of options for donation amount. They actually lowered it after feedback. It used to start around $10, but then people were giving feedback, and it turns out that they wanted to lower it because some people, they've already used their points for other things and only had like a little bit left, but still really want to participate and make a difference here. And another reason was that because there's 10 different causes over 10 different days, they want to be able to spread out the love amongst all these different causes. I also really like the educational component to this campaign and bringing awareness to all the different charities that people may not have known about before. So on the right here is just an example of a snippet that would show up every day in the news feed to share that day's charity highlight. And so it was just such a great starting point for important discussions around all these important causes. And I know that we at Bucketlist talk a lot about building human connections. WeHero, I'm sure you do as well, but a campaign like this is just such a great conversation starter, and it gives people a chance to learn really important and personal things about their colleagues and brings everyone closer together. And so just to end off the story here, the results, they saw a spike in employee engagement during the campaign, lots of participation from the get-go, from the picking of the charities to the donation part. And so 23% of their staff ended up donating towards this campaign. And just for context, redemptions have been slower over the winter months, just because historically we see this trend that people are saving up their points over the colder winter during months and saving them up for the summer to use towards outdoor experiences and all. So it was really cool just to see how people jumped on this opportunity to give to these great causes. And another cool thing we saw was that after the campaign, people ended up requesting that certain charities and NGOs that were displayed during this 10 days of giving, they requested that they stayed in the marketplace so they can continue to give towards these awesome causes. And I just want to share a quick second story before passing off to Ben. The second tool that we can use philanthropy for engagement is just engaging with the core values. And so for here, I want to share a quick story about Storable, one of our other clients who offer a suite of storage technology products. One of their core values is do more. And what this core value means to them has really been fleshed out over the years. They are really big on corporate social responsibility. They have a name for themselves. They call themselves, their employees, stewards of Storable, and they really aim to make their business decisions based on environmental justice, business ethics, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, all that good stuff. And so everything they do just really radiates this core value that they have. Another one of their core values they have that I thought was super interesting was the core value, be more. And at first, I think this can sound very stressful, but being more isn't always about asking more of ourselves. It's also about recognizing that we are whole people, that we don't live to work, and that there's so much of us that we can consider to let shine through in our daily lives. And just an example of what they do, because corporate social responsibility is just so ingrained in their culture, we see them living their core value through their rewards marketplace on Bucketlist. And so here's an example of some of a fraction of the causes that they enjoy donating to. They have a really robust donations category. And they're also, what's really interesting is that they're really proactive about adding more options based on global current events that are really meaningful to their employees. And I just thought that this was such a cool way that leadership is modeling its care and giving employees a way to give feedback on what they care most about and making it happen. And so results-wise, 7.5% of all of their rewards redemptions are donations to charity, which is really, really high. The industry average we see is about 0.5% to 1%. So Storables, 7.5% is amazingly high. And just to cap this off, here's a short little blurb from Nicole Estorable to really sum out how living their core values through philanthropy has really helped to impact their team in lots of positive ways. And Ben, I'll pass it off to you for your stories.
Yeah, you all heard me earlier on the webinar talking about the importance of that strategy of a level 1 to a level 3 volunteer, right? And so activating employees as early as possible around your social impact programs is critical. And I love sharing how Visa is doing this because they're doing a great job. And so when Visa onboards any employee group, they do them in groups, and every single one of their employees goes through a volunteer activation. And they do that in the first week of onboarding because they want them to get a taste for what social impact at Visa looks like and how important it is to the company. And B, they want them to have a really good volunteer experience in week 1 of their time at the company. And the result of this is amazing. Like, the result is that employees are actively participating in other corporate volunteer and in social impact initiatives in the company throughout the rest of their tenure there because they had such a great experience in week 1 at the company. They know how important it is to the company. And so I share this case study as just a great way to get employees activated early on and get them to be really big promoters of social impact at the company. And I really encourage companies to even think about that in week 1 of onboarding for any single one of your employees. I think it's a great opportunity and something to absolutely think about to drive a lot of success in your programs. And then Beck, if you go to the second one.
I actually wanted to ask a follow-up question to this one. You mentioned that it's important for people when they're getting onboarded since day 1 to be aware of this importance in the company. What are some tangible strategies you've seen people implement too?
Yeah, great question. So like a lot of these employees have already come together for like training and onboarding. And so depending on your company, it could be training on culture and policy within the business and like goals that the overall business has. A lot of those trainings take place. And so what we do is we inject kind of corporate volunteering into the agenda for those trainings. We keep those volunteer opportunities around an hour. So like, for example, in Visa's headquarters in Foster City, California, they have, 30 employees there at a time. They'll have an hour break and they'll have a WeHero volunteer experience. And in this case, Visa's super passionate about education. And so we partner with the Kids in Need Foundation to support underserved youth with access to the right school supplies. Specifically, they're focused on STEM supplies. So what that actually looks like, to your point, Becca, is that in the first 20 minutes, they're hearing a keynote from the nonprofit, understanding why the cause is so important. They're hearing from Visa's team on like why social impact at the company is so important. And then for the next half an hour, they're actually building STEM packs for underserved students for the rest of that time and tracking the amount of impact they're making in the number of students that they're supporting. So just to give you a tangible example of like what that actually looks like.
That's amazing.
This second example is just how you can inject kind of volunteering throughout the rest of your company in different circumstances. I think, one challenge is getting people together for volunteering. And so if you already have opportunities where your people are already together, it's an amazing opportunity to volunteer. And so Citrix is a great example in that they have, trainings and get-togethers for their teams all over the country. And so they travel to different cities. It could be North Carolina and Raleigh. It could be in Florida and Sarasota. And they're doing these gatherings. Sometimes they're 100 people, sometimes they're 300 to 500 people. And there are sales trainings and annual updates. They could be HR meetings, so on and so forth. But what they're doing is when these folks are getting together, they're using the mindset that they want to leave the cities that they're visiting better than the way that they found it. So because they have folks already together, they're injecting volunteering into all of these experiences. And what it looks like is that they're asking the employees, what causes they're very passionate about, but B, they're also looking at that city that they're visiting and doing the event and understanding what are the core problems and gaps and challenges that city's having. What are the nonprofits that need a lot of support? And we're bringing in volunteer activations to these conference centers, to these meeting areas, so that these people can volunteer and just feel awesome. And so again, I share this as an example of a great way to engage people. Again, really hard to bring people together, really hard to sometimes get people to sign up for events, but taking opportunities where people are already together and having them volunteer is a great way to remind them about the importance of social impact at your company, and why volunteering can be so powerful.
Amazing. I know you've been touching on about the idea of injecting it into your culture and all of that. And so I will again just ask if you had, how have you seen companies sort of incorporate philanthropy into their culture?
Yeah, I think, great question. There's a lot of ways that companies can do this. Again, taking opportunities where people are already together and injecting it is great. Finding different campaigns throughout the year. I think one of the greatest things that can happen, though, is getting leadership buy-in for these programs. We've noticed that, when leadership buy-in does occur, that engagement and social impact numbers increase substantially. And a lot of companies struggle to get leadership buy-in, whether it be for a volunteer program or event or for a social impact initiative that might be taking place. We think about it as like the best way to be successful there is campaigning. You might not be able to get the CEO of your company to actually jump in and support the cause or the program that you're looking to develop and grow, but you should campaign to get the highest person in the org chart to do this. So sometimes, for example, we've seen a lot of success with social impact teams campaigning and getting the CTO of the company to be a huge supporter, encouraging their teams to come in and support and do stuff like that. I think micro actions are another way to really inject it into our everyday. Micro actions, what I mean by that is just small acts of kindness that can be done that make a huge difference in somebody's life. Maybe it's making a small donation. Maybe it's doing some kind of small form of volunteering or donating a food item to your local food bank. There's a number of these micro actions that can take place. And what's awesome is that the CSR platforms are getting way better at tracking and measuring that as well. We might not have the time to dedicate to doing a large volunteer project. We might not have the money to donate to a substantial amount to make a huge difference. But if we can do micro actions, those micro actions can add up and make a huge difference. So there's so many other examples I could share on how to inject it in the culture overall, but those are just a few I can share off the top of my head.
Amazing. Thank you, Ben. I'm sure a lot of these questions coming in kind of have to do with that as well. So we can definitely share more as we go on these slides. Awesome. So just a couple of little tools and strategies to get started with corporate philanthropy. Ben, I believe the top two are your suggestions. So I would love to hear more about those.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best ways to get people excited, especially with volunteer programs, is offer a day or a week of service. I think having a variety of volunteer offerings and programs and events is great, but I think having a dedicated day or a week is fantastic. It's something that the employees and the entire company can look forward to. It can be consistent. It can be the smart day, like, hey, this is the day of social impact and the day of service for our company, and we do this every year. And so, we just finished doing this for Ancestry. They have the same week of service every single year. And because they do it at the same time every single year, it's something that's marked off on people's calendars and they show up for, and people are genuinely really excited about. And now that it's been happening for a few years, leadership has bought into this as well. So leadership's like encouraging people to take some time off, have fewer meetings during that week so that more and more people have the time to actually volunteer, which I think is great. And then, launching a giving program. I think it's really easy today to launch a giving program. It used to be so challenging. Like the technology wasn't very good. The platforms weren't all that great. But today we have a number of different platform and technology options that make this really easy to do, and allowing people to do small donations, to do small micro actions, kind of like we talked about, having the ability to track that, and just giving yourself the ability to start tracking and measuring that data is something that's super helpful. So you can just continue investing in improving ROI for your programs and growing those programs from the ground up. So just a few things that I think are a great way to get started.
Awesome, Ben. And points 3 and 4, just I think a quick summary from previous stories I've shared. So number 3, stay local and current, just to make sure that it's a cause that's really meaningful to your employees, because that will really help encourage them to engage with it and participate. And lastly, just to give people lots of different options to participate. So if you're doing donations, for example, just making sure that there's a range of starting dollar amounts available, so people feel really comfortable and encouraged when they're participating. And Ben, I know you're more on the in-person or like volunteering side of things. So was there any thoughts you had around accessibility and inclusivity when it comes to those kinds of events?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the things that we do a lot now is offer language support. We offer a lot of support for folks that, maybe aren't comfortable even coming to the office yet and being able to volunteer from home, for example. And I think just offering a lot of different volunteer formats to reach people where they are at in their life is really important. And so from purely virtual options, from, the full on in-person hands-on options, I think trying to bring volunteering to the people in a way that they find satisfying and works into their day is really important. So we want to make these as accessible as possible. We also have programs that focus on the cause areas of accessibility. And I think that's even a great place for some companies to start as well.
Really awesome. So we just want to wrap up all that good discussion with a fun group discussion. Since Ben, I know we've been sharing all of our stories. Would love to hear from the community we have here today. What are some ways you'd like to get your team engaged in corporate volunteering or giving this year? I know it's a tough question. Give people a few seconds to brainstorm. Ben, did you want to kick it off with an example that you've seen or are planning?
Yeah, I think, there's a number of ways. We noticed that a lot of folks love to get competitive. And so I think the way sometimes that you frame or message volunteer opportunities can be really key and really critical. And so an example of that is we have a water filter build program. One of these water filters will give 12 people clean water for 10 years. The impact's really high, but messaging is we have the water filter build challenge, first team to build, X number of water filters will be granted this kind of gift card for a team outing or something like that. And we've seen teams get really competitive and it's really awesome. And so leaning into the competitive side of things with a reward for accomplishing a massive amount of impact has been really fun and exciting. And so that's just some of the things that this year have been really fun to see. We just did a huge event where there was a huge challenge to see how many solar lights, for example, could be built within a 30-minute time frame. And teams prepped and organized for this, and it was really exciting to see.
Amazing. And just taking a look at the comments here, Tamiko says offering incentives. Daniela says a donation matching program. And curious, Daniela, I know you also submitted a question to Q&A about your launch for your first initiative. Is that what this is? Just to help us frame the answer better when it comes to Q&A. Yeah, you can feel free to let us know in the chat anytime. Perfect, thank you. And Kit says, we have a hybrid workforce. We'll love to find ways to get our remote employees engaged, mainly volunteering with time, more so than money. I can actually share a little bit about this as well. So my team is 100% remote, but we do have a couple of different hubs around the country and in the world. And so we are really starting to see people having this appetite for wanting to meet up in their little hubs. And we're thinking this year of making volunteering opportunities really localized, taking a shift together at a food bank, doing a park or beach cleanup. And we're also thinking of sponsoring a 5-kilometer walk as a charity fundraiser. So that could be really cool. But Ben, if you have any other thoughts, I know you shared a bit about remote, but if you have any other thoughts around helping remote folks volunteer, I think that would be cool for.
Yeah, Kit, just, shameless plug on the WeHero side of things. We do a lot of hybrid events. And so we're able to deliver the exact same volunteer experience at employees' homes as your employees in office would experience, for example. And so that water filter build, for example, your employees that are remote they could participate in that in the same way that your employees that are hybrid could, and they dial in and they can be a part of the same volunteer experience. And I think, the other option for your remote folks, Becca brings up like a really great point, like getting them involved in their local community, especially if they have groupings of employees in that area. But also the opportunity, if they don't want to leave their homes and they really want to stay remote, the opportunities for purely virtual volunteering as well. An example of that is, we have a program called Be My Eyes. It's an application that supports folks that have any kind of visual disabilities. And what you're actually doing is like having video calls with people that have that visual impairment. So for example, I did this event and I helped a gentleman find the bus stop, for example, because he couldn't see where it was. And I helped another woman, pick out her socks for the day. And those ways that you're connecting directly with another human, because we have the technology to do that, and really help them and make an impact in their day. Those can be really special ways to like connect with those folks that are remote and give them a really powerful experience at the same time.
Amazing. Yeah, we're seeing so many great comments in here about identifying needs in the communities around education, making things competitive. And I think Amanda was sharing about her experience with WeHero. Yeah, and having a consistent annual can be a big motivator for folks to join. It's awesome. And lastly, Casey's board match program, in-office blood drives. Oh, that's really cool idea of making it easy for people to participate. I've wanted to try donating blood for years, but it's like hard for me to understand how to get started. So if I had that would be really easy.
Yeah, to Casey's point, if anybody's interested in that, it's such a cool program. Like they'll show up in your office, set up for the day. I think it's a pretty small cost. Casey, you probably know better than me, but it's a great way to just, again, bring the volunteering to the people and make it really accessible for folks. So it's really easy to give back. So that's awesome.
Totally. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for the discussion just now. We'll start our wrapping up with just a bit of a summary of what we went over today. So today we went over the fact that employees are 5 times more engaged in companies with volunteer programs. We shared 5 reasons that make corporate giving and volunteering so meaningful and so powerful. We also shared a couple of ways in which philanthropy can be used as an engagement tool for employees. And lastly, we shared a couple of quick ways to get started with corporate philanthropy, volunteering, and charitable giving. Anything you want to add to that, Ben, before we moved on?
No, I'm eager to get into the Q&A because that's where the fun stuff happens.
So true. But yes, before we get into that, we just wanted to launch this second poll. There's so many buttons. I apologize. Awesome. Is it up now, Ben?
Yep.
Awesome. So yes, as the results are coming in, thank you so much for sharing what your feedback is on this with us. We're always looking to improve our webinars, so we just love to gather this feedback. And I also would invite you to share in the chat box as well if there was something that resonated with you today, something you really liked. We just really like to get a gauge on what we should do more of in the future, or what we should consider like adding to it. So just really appreciate all of the feedback that you have. And of course, if there's something you want to see us present on in the future, more than happy to take those suggestions as well. And cool, I'll leave that open for a few more seconds. And in the meantime, I'll just share a little bit about Bucketlist just to give some more context and invite you to connect with us. And so, as I touched on briefly before, Bucketlist Rewards is a employee rewards and recognition platform that makes it fun and easy for people to recognize and reward each other. And I think celebrating together all our different milestone achievements and a job well done is also super impactful. And so if you're interested in seeing how our platform can help to increase employee engagement as well as facilitate charitable giving for your employees, let me know in this next poll here. Let me just launch it. Awesome. And so, yeah, if you're interested in checking us out a little bit more, feel free to hit yes. And even if you're not looking for rewards and recognition right this second, we're always happy to share whatever resources we have that might be helpful, and share any stories that that might help you see how people are building up the rewards and recognition programs. And as people are filling that in, I'll just toss it over to you, Ben.
Awesome. Well, kind of like we probably talked about and probably like you got a sense of in the webinar, we do corporate volunteer and engagement programs. And so if companies are looking for, a one-off volunteer project, we can support there. If companies are looking for, an annual volunteer program where we're working with you on your volunteer and engagement strategy throughout the year and executing experiences throughout the year, let us know. We, again, try to offer volunteer formats in every format, whether it's in office or for remote employees. And one of the big changes we've had over the last year is we do a lot of global experiences. So for employees that in companies that have multinational offices, ability to do events and experiences in those countries is something we can absolutely support with. And we build custom events too. So if you have nonprofits that you're really passionate about, want to build something that's like a really unique experience, let us know. We love to help. And then Becca, if you just jump to that next slide. If people want to talk to us, we love just we work with hundreds of companies every year, just talking through what their goals are, what their engagement goals are, what they want to do from social impact, and we just love helping folks. So people I know every company is a little different in what their goals are and what their situation is, and we are more than open to just talking with folks and seeing what we can do to support and help. And even if people don't work with WeHero, we just want to be supportive and offer the data and information that we have and the case studies of what's really working and what's not out there in the field. And so let us know how we can support. We love helping companies find success with their social impact programs.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that, Ben. I'll let that leave open for a little bit longer as we share the professional development credits. So thank you to everyone who's come here today. I will just paste the HRCI and SHRM credits in the chat box as well, so you can have it easy access. We'll also be sending it out on email as well with the recording. So no worries if you did not have a chance to jot it down. Awesome. And now let's hit into Q&A, Ben. I know you're really excited about this portion. We noticed a few questions coming in. Do we want to start?
Want me to take Daniela's?
Yeah, let's do that.
Awesome. Daniela, awesome question. I love this. And hopefully you picked up a few tips too, as we kind of just talked through different ideas and programs. A few things for companies that are like launching their first volunteer program. I've noticed some companies that they'll launch their first volunteer event and it'll be like a 3 to 4 hour event or a full day event. And one thing that we recognize is that time is our employees' like most valuable resource, and it seems to be an increasingly more valuable resource to them. And so for that first kind of volunteer activation and getting people excited, I really encourage companies to try to limit that to about an hour in time span. We found that to be the sweet spot where like a lot of employees can show up, easy for them to take an hour out of their day. As we all probably experience, we do a lot of our schedule blocks in an hour for most of us. And so it just makes it easy and accessible for employees to show up, try this on, get excited about future volunteer initiatives that you may have, and be able to fit that in their schedule. So something to think about as you get people really excited. And, hopefully for your first volunteer experience that you're planning, the longer you have to promote and plan for this event, the better. I, always joke that, planning a volunteer event should be like planning a birthday party or a conference or anything like that. You want to give people a big heads up, get it in their calendar early on, and do everything you can to promote it. I think also doing fun things like creating, media assets and stuff like that, little teaser videos and images to like get people excited about the experience is really special. And then I think being detailed in regards to like the impact that folks will be creating. Everybody's trying to measure tasks and decisions in their day-to-day based on like the ROI that they're going to get from it, right? So if they're going like, should I go to this meeting? Should I go to this volunteer event? What am I going to get out of this? You being very clear on like, hey, if you come to this meeting, you're going to make this kind of impact. If it's a water filter build, if you come to this meeting, you will build a water filter that gives 12 people clean water for 10 years. Pretty hard for people to like say no to that, or at least a little more challenging for people to say no to that. So rather than going like, hey, come join this volunteer event, be like, come join us to build water filters, make a massive amount of impact, be very clear about the impact that people are creating. You'll get a much higher turnout for people that are showing up. And then again, snacks are great. So that's just me personally. I just love snacks. So I'll be there if you have like a great snack table.
Yeah, I feel like food is a great motivator. And so since we're talking about event planning and all of that, I think a question from Clara will be a really good fit for this topic too. So for international volunteer events, how far in advance is a good time to start?
Yeah, good question, Clara. With international events, obviously a few more complexities. Obviously, if you're especially trying to do it from a number of different international offices at the same time, the longer you can plan, the better. For WeHero, our minimum to plan these events is at least 30 days, but for international events, we really encourage to have 60 days to kind of plan this and make sure it's successful, especially when we're doing hands-on volunteering. There's materials that we need to make sure are on location, ready for your event to be successful. And we want to make sure that nothing's delayed and everything's running on time. And so again, the more time you can give yourself, the better, the less stress you'll have. Again, give yourself as much time as possible. 30 days minimum, 60 days is really ideal, at least on our side when we've had experience planning these events.
Totally. Awesome. And next question. How do you convince those holding the purse strings the importance of the 5 reasons we shared earlier to create a corporate initiative?
Yeah, doing a pilot. So I'll jump to just for the volunteering side of things exclusively, and how do you convince those with the purse strings to increase that budget and make it more powerful? Doing a pilot event's a great way to start. So just testing an experience out and having a detailed impact report is really important. For every event that we do a detailed impact report at the end. It shows, number of volunteer hours, the value of that volunteer time, sustainable development goals that were supported, actual impact that was created, so on and so forth. And that report's really critical, because if you do that pilot event and they can show those with the purse strings, hey, look, this is the result of this 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever it is, time span that we spent. We've measured all this data. This is the impact that was created. It shows that, return on investment. And I always love to say it shows that return with impact. I think that's something that has worked really well in the past, is just piloting this out, showing those, those stakeholders that have the purse strings, hey, this is really beneficial, especially doing surveys and getting feedback from your employees as well. And asking, your employees that are participating in the survey questions that are really important to those with the purse strings, how likely am I to stay with my company because volunteering is a big initiative? Have them answer that. Those kinds of questions and getting that kind of data from your volunteers is going to be really powerful and help convince those with the purse strings that this makes a huge difference. If you have more detailed questions on that, whoever asked that question, let me know. We help companies make pitches for budget quite often, and we have some tools that you can use. And so please reach out. We're happy to help with that there.
Amazing. And I think we have time for one last question. How do you narrow the focus of what philanthropic ventures to pursue for your organization? I know you mentioned prior about the importance of feedback and getting people involved from the get-go. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, first off, I'll say narrowing is really important. You could have a bunch of people supporting different causes, rowing in different directions, but if you have a few causes that you're dedicated as a company supporting, you have everybody rowing in the same direction, a lot more impact's created and it's a lot easier to track. And so I think there's 2 things. Again, surveying your employees and understanding the causes that are really important, and understanding the causes that are going to align really well with the brand of your company. And so, for example, we're working with a music company. They're a producer of music. They're about 500 employees. The cause area that they're supporting right now is very much focused on music therapy, actually. And this is something that, the employees that were surveyed really got behind, as well as it aligns so well with the company. And so now everyone's kind of in the same direction, supporting a variety of nonprofits that are focused on music therapy. And that's really critical. So again, serving your employees, understanding the cause areas that are important to them, that's going to help get engagement for these volunteer events. And then again, making sure it aligns in some kind of nice way with your company. Because if it aligns with the company, it's a lot more easy to get budget for these kinds of volunteer initiatives as well, and leadership support.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and experiences with us, Ben. Really, really appreciate it. We are unfortunately at time today. Just want to end off by saying thank you to everyone who joined us today. It was really great seeing you all, and I hope that you enjoyed the session as much as we have. And for sure, we've had our LinkedIn up here. If you'd like to continue the conversation, ask Ben or myself some more questions, or just vice versa, see what each other is up to. More than happy to connect. And Ben, was there anything you want to add before we wrap up today?
No, we didn't get to all the questions. So if folks would like to reach out, please reach out. Happy to help and support in any way that we can. And thanks for jumping on today. And thanks, Becca, for hosting this.
Bye, everyone.